Making It Last, where we share ideas to help families tackle major issues. I'm your host, Regina DeMeo, and with me today is Pfeffer, who's been a psychotherapist for over 15 years. And today we're talking about how personal issues can bleed into relationships with others. And I'm so happy to have you here, Sherry.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
It's so fun.
So I kind of want to start with conscious dating, because it's a topic that keeps coming up a lot. And I don't know if maybe it stems from the fact that more of these dating sites ask you to think about your must-haves and your can't-stands, or maybe it's just that people are much less inclined to waste time, so they're taking the time to think about what they need. But can you kind of explain what conscious dating is?
Sure. What I'd say simply is conscious dating is getting very clear about what it is your intentions and goals are for dating. And with that, going through a process of getting to know which behaviors and which beliefs that you hold either take you closer to reaching that goal or are preventing you from reaching that goal.
Okay. Do you think it's fair to say that the goals can change? Like somebody who's just recently divorced, which is most of my clients, they might be less inclined to jump into something super serious. But then after a few years of the dating game, they might change and their goals could be to establish a more serious relationship.
Exactly. They change throughout life. And
Okay.
it's really a process of being honest about where you are right now and what it is you most desire right now.
When you say being honest, do you mean being honest with yourself, or do you also mean being honest with the other people?
I believe both.
Okay.
The first step is being really honest with yourself, and that will translate out into the people that you're meeting so that you're not wasting time. You're both very clear where both of you are.
I find a lot of my clients, they struggle with, how honest should I be? Like, how much do I need to disclose about my divorce or, my own issues? And it seems to be a constant struggle.
Yeah, and it may not be that you disclose up front about, the personal details of your past, but what I feel is important is disclosing what it is that you're looking for, so both people are just on the same page. And you're also honoring yourself that way, because if you're really honest with yourself and that translates to the other person, then you're not going to end up feeling resentful or disappointed as much as if you came into the process of a date, let's say, or a relationship really unclear about what it is that was going to be working for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you're helping somebody figure out what their goals are, like what do you think is the first step to helping them become self-aware?
Well, I always start with clients in creating a vision. So this is where we kind of go inside, look deep, and think about what is your greatest possibility for love that you believe about yourself. And that could be anything. It could be, I just got out of a divorce and I want to take some time to get to know myself, and I really just want to focus on me and have maybe multiple relationships. Or it may be for a woman that, I am at a point in my life where I'm really ready to get married and start my family. And just, there's no judgment on what that vision is, but we like to really go to what is it in a big way, and that's where we start kind of digging into what are your deepest values, what are the things in life that you are committed to having.
Okay. And do you find that in this process you also sometimes have to break down false assumptions? Like, I know a lot of my friends say, oh, if this guy is 40 and he's never been married, forget it. Like, I won't even go on a first date. I'm like, Are you crazy? I mean, you don't know what the situation is. Maybe he's been in a long-term committed relationship but just never gotten married. I mean, maybe he focused on his career, especially doctors. They spend a long time doing their residency.
Yes.
So do you find that you have to break down some certain false assumptions?
Yes. So definitely false assumptions about external factors. This package means this.
Right.
So we definitely start with that, but there's assumptions about so many things too. There may be assumptions that we have to break down about what this person may want. So for example, a man on a date with a woman who's in her 30s may assume she wants to get married and have children, and that
Right.
just may not be the case. So we kind of look at the assumptions that may get us in trouble
Right.
and encourage clients to make assumptions that are kind of more based in fact. If you're sitting with someone and they're clearly telling you, I do not believe in commitment, then that would be a good assumption to believe that
Right.
person, right?
So really you're encouraging more of an open mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times I hear from people that when they go into psychotherapy and they're analyzing themselves, that they're told to look at past behaviors, like past patterns. So what's the point of that exercise?
Well, I feel it's really a great exercise to kind of look back at your history. So especially if you're in a process where you're not getting what you want and you're frustrated and you're tired of it, then kind of looking at something that may have been happening in your life. If it's happened more than once or two times, we might call that a pattern. So
Like women who have repeated abusive relationships.
exactly. It's like you're attracting the same person, just in different shoes.
Right.
So it's the same thing that keeps happening over and over. So what I do is I help that client look at what is it that I'm believing about myself that is leading me into these patterns that are only ending up leaving me disappointed or leaving me hurt. And we just have the person take full responsibility for who they're being that's creating that experience.
That makes sense. So do you find when digging into the past, some dig more deeply than others, but there's issues from childhood that seem to then percolate when they're attaching to a person, like a new person?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, intimate relationships brings out our most vulnerable, the most vulnerable parts of ourselves, and that's the language that I use. So what I like to do with people is kind of explore what are these parts of ourselves. You might refer to one as the inner child, or
I love that.
yeah. So many people can resonate with having an inner child that feels abandoned somehow. So how does that play out in not only just dating, but how does that play out once you get really close? Do you kind of have a more avoidant style of relating and attaching to someone where you kind of push away, or do you have a style that becomes more anxious, that you start to cling? Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's important to get to know that about yourself.
Yeah, especially because it's ironic that, those behaviors tend to create the opposite result. So the clingier you become, the more you tend to repel people, right?
Yeah.
Which is not the result they're actually looking for.
Yeah, both styles can be sabotaging in certain ways.
So another thing I find interesting is that sometimes it seems the things that people attract originally are not necessarily the same. Like over time, they repel a person. So let's say, for example, I might be very high energy. Everybody knows I'm generally very optimistic, and I'm kind of always on the go. And somebody might be really attracted to that in the beginning, and then over time they're like, oh my God, she never stops. She's always on the go, and it's always one thing and then another. And over time, it sort of wears on them. So how can you be more conscious about that?
Well, I find in those situations that when we enter relationships based on what I call those parts, those inner child parts, then that person's quality that we're initially attracted to may be fulfilling a need for some of those inner children, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And so if we know about that, like for example, if I grew up in a home where there was a real tight hold on spending money, that nobody was allowed to spend money, it was just kind of a culture in the family, and that felt oppressive to me, then I might be attracted to a person who spends money freely, no questions asked, and that might be great in the beginning because it's kind of liberating for that oppressed child part. Exactly, okay. Yeah. But a few years in, that same behavior of that person who's just spending like there's no tomorrow might actually get really wearing on me, and I might start to say, you know what, I'm not into that anymore. That doesn't work for me. So what I think is important once you have a situation like that, just to look at where it came from and to kind of have compassion. This is something I really needed, that was really important to me in the beginning, and that's why I chose this partner. And can I have compassion for that part of me that was really drawn to that, and can I have compassion for this part of my partner, whatever it is for him or her? So it's always great when you can get to know those things about yourself in the beginning, so then there's a little more of a balance. You may not need a partner to, have this quality that's on the opposite side of the spectrum so much. Does that?
No, that makes perfect sense. Because I hear this a lot in my clients when they're telling me their story. A lot of people were once very passionate with their partners. Obviously, they walked down the aisle, they got married. But then over time, these things that they were originally attracted to, the fact that they enjoyed playing the savior role. That's a big one, right? It's when I met her credit was really bad, and she kind of needed me, and I scooped her up, took care of her bills, and made life better. But she keeps having these same issues with credit cards, and she keeps having these same issues with spending. And so what originally attracted to them over time has ceased to be fun. They've ceased to want to be the savior. And I'm like, well, okay, you didn't obviously pay attention to the fact that this might be it for the long haul, right?
Yeah. And what I would do with that person is kind of look at, how is that serving you? How is being the savior really serving a need inside of you? And so once someone's able to see that, oh, wow, maybe then they can sort of have compassion for, how now there's a part that's really resenting that they're in that role, and just to kind of balance it out a little bit.
But so from your point of view, it doesn't have to be the end of the relationship. You just have to kind of work through the shift.
Exactly. If both people are willing to work through it and maybe renegotiate some of those roles, then there's no telling how much growth can happen. Not all couples choose to do that, obviously.
Right. I see the ones that obviously completely fail.
Yeah.
But I do know there's another 50% out there that somehow manage to make it work. So it's nice to hear that, you can fix things when you see yourself growing apart.
Yes. It's really nice to experience that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to take a short break.
Okay.
And then we will be right back.
I remember how much you said you liked wine.
Oh.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who would love to put up with you.
Welcome back to Making It Last, where we share ideas to help families tackle major issues. I'm your host, Regina DeMeo, and with me today is Pfeffer, who has been helping families for over 15 years as a psychotherapist. Thanks so much for being here, Sherry.
It's great to be here.
So we were talking about how, sometimes couples will experience a shift, and you can actually help them realign their goals and kind of renegotiate the pact they have. Yeah. Which is awesome, because I see a lot with my divorce clients that, especially it seems that there's a lot of people who have a life-altering event, whether it's like a mom that dies or a scare with breast cancer. There's some life-altering event that occurs that all of a sudden then changes them. It makes them rethink things, and maybe their goals are different.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's becoming a mom. That's a major shift. And they don't know how to realign with their partners. Yeah. So I don't know how you do that, but in your experience, can that be done?
It definitely can be done. And what I help couples look at is things that maybe were being, let's say, a little bit pushed under the rug. It wasn't too bad. And then some big life event happens, and then it all kind of comes to the surface. Right. So it's not that that stuff wasn't there before, but it was either not so bad or it was somehow still working. The scales were not balanced just yet, or imbalanced just yet. So when something like that happens, we kind of help couples renegotiate, okay, what is the shift that's happening? What is now being asked of each other that wasn't being asked before? And can the two of you meet those needs that maybe weren't being asked prior to the life event? So, it's always a 50-50. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But it is a beautiful thing when two people can meet a major life stressor, or, a not so major life stressor, whatever it is, and really work together to meet each other.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, a lot of my clients who have recovered from breast cancer or prostate cancer, I will ask them, well, was this person supportive all the time, and then all of a sudden they bailed on you when this came up? And more times than not, they'll say, well, no, they were actually never around, but I thought that in a major crisis they would step up.
Yeah.
And I think, well,
Yeah.
you kind of set yourself up for failure there.
Yes.
And I guess what you're trying to say is you try and, going forward, try and set people up to win,
Yes.
succeed.
Yeah, it's really kind of identifying and communicating about what is happening now in our relationship, in our lives, that wasn't happening before. And so just naming it is really important, instead of just pretending like we have to be strong and muscle through this without any talking about it. So once we name it, then we kind of try to set each person up so that they can win. And that's a whole process in itself.
Well, I think it's super important, especially when a woman becomes a mother, because I remember when I went through that, and it's a very happy moment, don't get me wrong, but it's also very stressful because all of a sudden you can't give 100% to work anymore. And at the same time, you can't give 100% to your child. So you feel like you're failing on both fronts.
Yes.
And then your body's changing. If you're breastfeeding, you kind of feel like a cow.
Yes.
It's a very stressful time for a woman, and I don't know that all of us are very candid about that.
Yeah.
Even with our partners.
I don't think so. I think there's still a lot of stigma for women to actually have permission to talk about the ambivalence they may feel about becoming a mother, that there's room for all of it, the good, the bad. But most new mothers would acknowledge that, yes, there is a part of me that really is sick of this, or can't stand it, or wishes I wasn't a mother. And there's not a whole lot of room. It's getting better, but there's still not a whole lot of room for that to be acknowledged in our culture.
Right. And then there's this other thing I noticed, which is that a lot of us tend to have perfection, maybe some people I hang out with, but we have perfectionist tendencies, right? And so we want everything done perfectly, and that becomes super hard, especially once you're juggling a child and work, right? So those perfectionist tendencies sort of have to be reined in. It's like the saying goes, perfection is the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
And a lot of my male clients will say, well, if it wasn't going to be done exactly her way, I was going to incur this wrath. So I just gave up. Like, I just let her take over everything. And that's what tips the scales in their marriage.
Yeah.
Do you find that happens a lot?
I do. I think a lot of women do feel that pressure, or maybe were raised that way, so they take that into their adult lives, and it just stops working at some point. So it might have acquired us so many great things, but when you add in a partnership, you add in a child or multiple children, it's really, I would say, impossible to keep that going. So
The perfectionist views.
yeah, it's just, it's something's going to give eventually.
Right.
So so I do feel like it's an opportunity for women to kind of allow that perfectionist part of themselves to relax a little bit and realize that nothing bad is going to happen if they allow that perfectionist tendency to relax. And in fact, a lot of good might come from that, because then you can have, let's say, a husband that can actually participate, even if his standards of, doing something well might not look the same as yours, but you can appreciate that he can participate, and you can act more as a unit, and it gives your partner a chance to participate versus him saying, I'm not going to even try if I can't do it the way that you do it.
Right. Like, I always warn my friends that become moms. I'm like, don't complain if the diaper isn't perfectly put on, because if you complain, guess what? they're just not going to do it. And you don't always want to be responsible for changing every single diaper.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing I find interesting is, these people have issues, my clients, just being honest with their families about what's going on. And what I found in my own life is that my family is actually a great resource whenever I think, something isn't going right. Like, they're a good sounding board. But a lot of people don't seem to have these relationships where they feel comfortable even telling I have clients that won't even tell their own parents they're going through the divorce until, like, the agreement is signed and everything's okay.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how people can do that. I mean, if there's something majorly wrong in my life, I'm calling my brother.
Yeah.
I'm calling my dad.
Yeah.
What is it about some people that they can't even talk to their own relatives?
Well, in certain families, there's a culture around keeping things quiet and not talking about problems. So that can be so embedded in a family that when something like divorce happens and, you're living in this state, they're living in this state, that person who's going through it may feel really uncomfortable sharing that. They may feel like if they tell mom or dad that they're not going to respond in a supportive way, or mom and dad might feel some level of shame about that, some level of disappointment about that, depending on what your family, culture, religion all has to say about divorce. So unfortunately, it just creates more of a separation.
Interesting. So are there other networks that people can tap into, like support groups in the area?
There are, yeah. There is a support group in the Washington, D.C. area. I think it's called New Beginnings, and I know that's for people that are going through either separation or divorce, and it's not run by therapists, but I think people really that don't have that familial support find through other people who are going through the process that they're going through.
Okay, well, that's great. And then I guess, that's really something people need to tap into more, because I can't tell you, sometimes I have clients where in Maryland you have to bring a witness to your divorce hearing. And I've had people say, I don't know who to bring.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean you don't know who to bring? Bring your neighbor, bring your cousin, bring your, your best friend. They're like, I don't have anybody I can bring.
Yeah.
It's just really sad.
It is. It is. So we want people to feel less isolated around it, whether it's a group like New Beginnings or whether it's a therapy group, that there are all types of things that people can tap into so they don't have to feel so alone. And if there's nothing in your community, there's so much online today that you can find support.
And there's some great books, too.
There's great books, there's online resources, there's workshops, there's seminars. I mean, you name it, there's so much out there for people that are ending relationships and transitioning in their lives.
I mean, I find the ending to be rather easy. I told this to one of my friends the other day. We were having lunch. I'm like, everybody wants to know why I blog about dating so much, right? It's kind of ironic. I'm a divorce lawyer, and yet, like, what I blog about the most is love and finding love, right? But that's because the legal part is super easy. Once you're done with your divorce, legally everything is all done. You don't have to worry about that. And your child custody schedule is done. Everything is locked in. Your finances, you've divided them. That's easy. Most people can move on and return back to focusing on their work and focusing on their kids. But dating is the thing that they will struggle with the most.
Yes, it is. There are no rules to dating anymore. I mean, there are people of all ages looking for so many different things. So it's a really confusing world in terms of dating. So I get it, that it is hard and people do need some guidance. And that's where working with a coach or a therapist, or maybe you have a group of girlfriends or guys that, talk about this kind of stuff. But having a little direction when you enter into that world, I believe is a really great thing in having the life that you do ultimately want, right? Because if you had a really big disappointment or a big ending, there's a lot of grieving that has to take place around that.
Right.
But life is short, and most of us do want some great love, companionship, relationship. So why not take that time to get to know yourself a little bit and to really ask yourself those deep questions, what it is that I value most in life and how I want a partner to fit in with those values, and what is it that I'm most committed to in life, and I'm committed to having the best possible life that I can, and how can I attract someone to share that with me and to enhance that with me. So
That makes perfect sense.
I think it's a great thing.
In terms of like the investment of time, how long do you normally work with somebody?
It varies. I have seen clients for a couple of years or more. I have clients recently that I do more coaching with, and within a few months, they feel like, wow, I've really gotten a lot, and then I get emails or phone calls about, I'm in this relationship now with this great guy, we're working toward marriage, and so I love hearing about that.
Oh, yeah, and success stories are what keeps it going.
Yes, yeah, so it's really great to know that doesn't have to be, a long process, but, dedicate some time to it. It's, the rest of your life that you're talking about if you're looking for a life partner.
Yeah, and I think that, everyone has an opinion, but some are definitely more informed than others, and I feel like people sometimes are getting really bad advice from people who,
yes,
clearly they're not doing that well in the dating scene themselves, so why are you even listening to that person? And plus, whatever you say is not confidential. Whatever your clients share with you is completely confidential.
It is, yeah.
And you've been trained to help people through this journey.
Yeah.
So, I think that makes a lot more sense. So I just want to ask you one last question, which is, what's the most rewarding part about what you do?
Well, of course, when I work with couples, when I get the emails about the marriage happened, if they were considering marriage, or the baby's on the way, and if I'm working with singles, hearing about their great loves and how our work together really allowed that to happen for them, and so just when I know that the work that I'm doing with someone is really impacting how the rest of their lives go, and just knowing that this is such a gift that they're giving themselves.
Right.
So I feel honored to be working with someone who is committed to being the best possible person they can and increasing their level of self-awareness. I think the world would be such a better place if everybody participated in that to some degree. Right. So it's the most rewarding thing I can ever imagine.
Well, thanks for all the work that you do. It's really amazing.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if someone wanted to contact you for more information, how would they do that?
My website is probably the best place to go. It's sherrypfeffer.com.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week on Making It Last.